Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're diving into an idea that honestly might just change how you think about progress, about learning, even personal growth.
Right.
We often picture development as this, steady upward climb, like a graph line always heading up and to the right.
Standard view, yeah.
But what if, and this is the key thing, what if to truly get better at something, to reach that higher level, we sometimes have to get a little bit worse first? What if the path isn't a straight line at all, but a journey with these, surprising twists and turns, maybe even temporary dips?
That sounds really counterintuitive, doesn't it?
It does. And that seemingly counterintuitive idea is exactly what we're exploring today. This fascinating thing in human development known as U-shaped functions.
Right.
Imagine a skill or an ability. It appears early in life, seems to be going well for a bit.
Yeah, like a kid picks something up quickly.
Exactly. Then it appears to diminish, maybe vanish for a while, only to come back later, often, at a much more sophisticated, integrated level.
It sounds almost contradictory, like losing ground to gain ground.
Precisely.
Yeah.
But it's a very real pattern, and it's been observed quite widely.
It absolutely is real, and it's far more than just some quirky observation for developmental psychologists.
No.
This concept, it directly challenges some of our deepest assumptions about how we learn, how we grow, how we adapt as humans. Leading research, including a key source we looked at from the University of Bremen, highlights this isn't some brand new idea, but it's still considered an unsolved problem in developmental psychology.
An unsolved problem. Interesting.
Yeah, a really complex puzzle that researchers are still working hard to fully understand. So, our deep dive today, we're going to unpack why these U-shapes happen.
Okay.
We'll look at some genuinely surprising real-world examples, things you might never have thought followed this pattern.
Right.
And then we'll really dig into what this all means for how we assess development, how we design learning, maybe even how we approach things like therapy.
So our mission for you, our listener, is basically to give you a shortcut to understanding this really intriguing concept.
Yeah, cut through the complexity.
We'll arm you with some surprising facts, clear explanations, and hopefully some actionable insights, some practical implications that might just shift how you view learning and growth.
Both in yourself and maybe in others around you, like kids or colleagues.
Exactly. Get ready to rethink what progress actually looks like. Okay, let's really unpack this idea then, U-shaped functions. When we usually think about development, maybe a child learning to walk or a student mastering algebra, or even us learning a new software.
Right, any skill acquisition.
Our mental model usually just defaults to steady, continuous improvement. We see that graph line always going up. Monotonic progression, I think, is the term.
That's a technical term, yeah. Always increasing, or at least never decreasing.
But U-shaped functions just, they defy that expectation completely. They throw a wrench in the works, a temporary dip in that upward path.
You've absolutely hit on the key distinction there. This isn't just about, slowing down or hitting a learning plateau for a bit.
Or just having an off day.
Exactly. This is about a demonstrable, measurable dip in performance, a temporary regression where a skill or ability that was clearly there before seems to, wither or disappear
before coming back stronger.
before being reclaimed later, often at a higher, more flexible, more integrated level. Developmental psychologists like Woolwill back in the 70s, they describe these functions as mapping that relationship between age and observed changes in behavior.
Okay.
And a U-shaped function specifically refers to this pattern: emerges, declines, reemerges.
But just to be crystal clear, it's not just a flat spot. It's an actual measurable step backward before maybe taking 2 steps forward, an active decline.
Precisely. That temporary regression, that's the defining feature. That's what sets U-shaped functions apart.
And that's what makes them so confusing, I imagine.
And so important to study. Because when you see a child, for example, seemingly lose an ability they definitely had, it immediately narrows down the possible explanations. Any good theory has to account for why it was there, why it went away, and why it came back.
It forces you to think differently.
Absolutely. This inherent paradox, it really stimulates the search for appropriate, often quite complex explanations about what's really going on underneath.
Right.
It forces us to ask, why would this happen? What's going on in the developing brain or body that causes such a dip? It really challenges our basic ideas of how learning unfolds. What's really fascinating here, and our source material dives into this, drawing heavily on Robert Siegler's work.
A big name in the field, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
He presents, or the source synthesizes, 3 main theoretical lenses for understanding why these dips might happen. And they're not necessarily, mutually exclusive.
Okay, so multiple angles.
Exactly. They offer different, maybe complementary perspectives, helping us piece together this puzzle. Each one gives us a unique window into how learning and adaptation work.
All right, let's break them down. What's the first theory? What's one reason for the dip?
Okay. The first theory suggests the U-shaped decline happens because of the acquisition of a more systematic processing strategy, usually in childhood.
A more systematic strategy.
Yeah, and that new, more organized strategy temporarily leads to worse performance on certain specific tasks. Think of it like your brain is upgrading its operating system.
Okay, I like that analogy.
You're shifting from maybe a less structured, intuitive way of doing something to a more rule-based, organized approach.
So hang on. Learning a more complex, maybe more correct or rule-based system somehow makes you temporarily worse at something you used to do intuitively.
Bingo.
You're trading that initial simple competence for a period of fumbling while you master the more sophisticated thing.
You've nailed it. It's like a temporary disorganization, but it's in service of achieving a higher form of organization later on.
Wow.
Siegler, in his work, he characterized this U-shaped path as starting with initial correct performance, but it's often based on a lack of real knowledge.
Just getting lucky, maybe. Or rote memorization.
Exactly. Maybe they just happened to get it right or memorized a specific instance without understanding why. Then that's followed by a period of consistently incorrect performance.
The dip.
The dip. And that's because of incomplete knowledge. They've started to grasp a new rule or pattern, but they apply it too broadly or incorrectly, leading to errors.
Okay.
And then these incorrect performances are eventually superseded by correct ones based on advanced, truly comprehensive knowledge and experience. They've fully integrated the new, complex understanding, including all the nuances and exceptions.
Can you give us a really solid example of this? It feels a bit abstract still. How does this actually look in a child?
Yeah, absolutely. A great illustration comes from a study by Nami and colleagues. They looked at infants, about 18 months old.
Yeah.
Initially, these infants could connect certain gestures with what they referred to, like they could learn a specific hand movement meant dog, even if the gesture looked nothing like a dog.
So just a basic association.
Pretty much a general associative ability. But here's the U-turn. As these kids started to figure out that gestures are often iconically related to what they mean.
Meaning they look like the thing. Like flapping hands for bird.
Exactly. As they grasped that concept that gestures can visually resemble their reference, they actually got worse at connecting gestures that were not iconically related.
Oh, seriously?
Yeah, their accuracy on those arbitrary, non-iconic gestures went down. Their developing understanding of symbolic representation, that gestures represent something, often visually, temporarily messed with their earlier, simpler associative learning.
So the new insight actually created interference.
Precisely. It's only as they got older, gained more experience with language and gesture, learned that some are iconic and some are just symbols. Only then did they become skillful again across the board.
Wow.
The new, more systematic understanding of iconicity temporarily tripped them up on the older, more generalized ability. It's a perfect example of a cognitive upgrade causing a temporary dip.
Okay, that makes it much clearer. What's the second explanation?
The second explanation focuses on the adoption of novel processing strategies. These new strategies might initially cause cognitive overload and temporary losses in processing efficiency.
Okay, so this isn't about partial knowledge. It's about trying a whole new way of doing things.
Exactly, a
Yeah.
completely new mental pathway.
So in this case, the brain is it's trying to juggle too much new stuff all at once.
Yeah.
Like, when you try to learn a really hard piano piece
Mhm.
and suddenly you can't even play the simple stuff you knew before.
That's a perfect analogy. Your brain's just totally consumed by trying to manage the new, complex pattern.
Right.
Bjorklund and others found that using these truly novel strategies often puts huge demands on our cognitive resources. Imagine your brain has a limited budget of processing power.
Yeah.
When you're trying a new complex strategy, a massive chunk of that budget goes just to managing the strategy itself, leaving less available for the actual task.
Creates a bottleneck.
Precisely. A cognitive traffic jam. It can easily decimate the resources left for the task, leading to that temporary inefficiency. But here's the critical part. Once those novel strategies are fully adopted, once they become more automatic, less demanding,
And things get better.
then they lead to much more efficient and sophisticated processing in the long run. Worker and colleagues saw similar things in infant language perception, new processing demands temporarily reducing efficiency.
So the brain's actively rewiring itself, and that can be messy for a bit.
Exactly. It's a necessary but sometimes inefficient process of adaptation.
Okay, that makes sense too. What about the third explanation? You said it was maybe the most subtle.
Right. The third one Siegler suggested is that U-shaped development could arise from unequal rates of change in certain underlying processes, where each of those underlying processes is actually improving steadily, monotonically.
Unequal rates of change. Okay, this sounds a bit more abstract again. Can you give us a really concrete example? How does one part getting ahead of another cause a dip?
Absolutely. And this is a classic one. Many parents listening will probably recognize this instantly. It's the U-shaped development of producing irregular past tense forms in English.
Okay. Like go becomes went, not good.
Exactly. Or eat becomes ate, not eated. Initially, a very young child might correctly say, I went to the park.
How? Just by copying.
Pretty much, yeah. By rote learning. They've heard it, they've memorized went as a single unit, an individual word associated with go in the past.
Okay.
But then, as their language experience grows, they start to grasp the powerful, super useful rule for forming regular past tense verbs.
The ed rule.
Yeah, the ed.
Exactly. Like walk becomes walked, play becomes played. It works for so many verbs. So they start to over-regularize. They apply this fantastic new rule everywhere, even where it doesn't belong.
So that's when they start saying I goed or I eat at dinner.
That's exactly it. That's the moment. For a period, they might say I goed or I eat it or he run fast.
So that good phase, that's the bottom of the U, even though they used to say went.
That is the very bottom of the U. And paradoxically, it's actually a sign of cognitive progress.
How so? It sounds like a mistake.
Because they're not just mimicking anymore, they are actively trying to make sense of the patterns, the rules in language. They've extracted a rule and they're testing it out.
Right, applying their new knowledge.
Exactly. The rule learning mechanism, which is developing really fast and powerfully, temporarily overpowers those specific, memorized irregular forms. It's a phase of linguistic reorganization.
Okay.
Then, with more exposure, more practice, and eventually acquiring and mentally storing those specific irregular verbs alongside the rules for regular ones, their processing becomes more nuanced.
They learn the exception.
They learn the exceptions. Their brain integrates both systems, the rule and the exceptions. So they eventually go back to saying I went or I ate correctly and consistently.
That's fascinating.
It's a really clear demonstration of that dance between different learning mechanisms. Rote memorization first, then powerful rule generalization causing errors, and finally, the sophisticated integration of both. Researchers like Marcus, Pinker, Plunkett, they've all documented this extensively.
Okay, so this is where it gets really interesting for me. These aren't just theories cooked up in a lab, right? Developmental psychologists have actually found solid empirical evidence for these U-shapes across a whole range of areas.
Yes, absolutely.
It really drives home just how fluctuant, how, I don't know, fragile maybe development can seem sometimes. It's definitely not always that smooth upward path we imagine.
No, it's this temporary regression where abilities that seem solid just seem to wither for a bit, even though they were clearly there before.
Right.
It really challenges that simple idea that once you learn something, you just build on it. Sometimes it seems like a skill gets, I don't know, deconstructed, broken down, and then rebuilt in a better way.
And that deconstruction phase is the dip.
That's the dip, the bottom of the U.
Okay, let's start with something really fundamental. You mentioned this earlier, and it blew my mind a bit. Walking. How on earth does walking fit this pattern? I mean, babies learn to walk, and then they just walk better, right?
Yeah, it's probably one of the most surprising examples. In motor skills, researchers like Esther Thalin and her colleagues back in the 80s, they reported a U-shaped development for step-like movements at birth.
Step-like movements. What's that?
If you hold a newborn upright, supporting them under their arms, their feet touching a surface, they often exhibit what's called the stepping reflex.
Oh, I think I've seen videos of that. It looks like they're trying to walk.
Exactly. Rhythmic leg movements, like walking. But here's the U. This ability seems to disappear, or at least fade dramatically, typically between about 2 and 12 months old.
Wait, it disappears. They stop doing it. Why? I thought it was practice for walking.
That's the intuitive thought, but no, it largely vanishes for a while. Most parents just don't see it happening anymore during that window.
Okay, that is genuinely surprising. So what makes them lose it? Why would a useful reflex just go away?
It is surprising, and it's a brilliant example of that third explanation we talked about, unequal rates of development.
Oh, okay. Different parts developing at different speeds.
Exactly. The Mullen and Ulrich, in later work, showed really elegantly that this disappearance is mainly caused by a crucial imbalance. The baby's body weight increases rapidly.
Okay, they get chunkier.
Right. But the strength in their leg and neck muscles increases more slowly.
Ah. So they get too heavy for their own legs, basically.
Precisely. Think about it. Their little legs and trunk get heavier much faster then. Their muscles develop the raw strength needed to support that increased weight against gravity.
So the reflex is still there, neurologically, but they physically can't do it.
That's the idea. The neural pathways are active, the reflex pattern exists, but the physical constraints, the relative weakness compared to the mass, make it impossible to execute the stepping motion on a solid surface.
Wow. Okay, how'd they prove that?
This is the ingenious part. They did an experiment. They put the infants in water.
In water?
Yeah. By submerging them partially, the water's buoyancy supported much of their body weight, reducing the strength needed. And remarkably, the step-like movements came right back in infants who showed absolutely no stepping response on land just moments before.
No way, that's incredible proof.
Isn't it? It wasn't about teaching them again, it was just removing the physical constraint that was masking the ability. A perfect, tangible illustration of how asynchronous development mass versus strength creates a U-shape in a fundamental motor skill.
That makes so much sense when you explain it like that, but definitely not obvious.
Okay, what about something more complex, like typing? You wouldn't expect a U-shape there. Practice makes perfect, then maybe slow decline with age, right?
That was the common assumption, yeah. Another fascinating, unexpected example comes from research on expert typists. For ages, everyone thought typing speed would just steadily decrease as people got older, mainly because reaction times naturally slow down.
Makes sense. Slower reflexes, slower typing. Seems logical, but Udall and Perlmutter, in a study from the late 80s, they found a clear U-shaped function. While older expert typists did objectively have slower individual keystroke reaction times compared to younger colleagues.
Okay, so that part was true.
Yes, but, and this is the key, they often tended to slightly outperform the younger typists on overall typing speed tasks.
Hold on. How is that even possible? If their fingers are moving slower between keys, how can their overall speed be faster? That sounds like magic.
It's not magic, but it is pretty amazing cognitive adaptation. What the researchers discovered was that the older, more experienced typists compensated for their slower keystroke speed by significantly increasing their letter span.
Letter span. What's that?
It means they weren't just thinking one letter ahead. Because of their vast experience, their deep expertise, they were planning further ahead. They were mentally grouping more letters, maybe even whole words or common phrases, together before executing the sequence.
So they're processing in bigger chunks, more strategically.
Exactly, like a chess master thinking several moves ahead, not just reacting to the last move. This higher-level strategic planning allowed them to maintain a smoother, more continuous flow, effectively overcoming the decline in raw individual reaction speed.
So wisdom and strategy compensating for raw speed decline.
Perfectly put. It's a fantastic demonstration of how acquired expertise, strategic thinking, a more efficient mental model can compensate for and even overcome a decline in a more basic component, resulting in that U-shaped recovery of overall performance.
That's really cool. Okay, you mentioned language before, the GOAD phase.
Yeah.
Can parents actually hear this U-shape happening in their kids' speech?
Oh, absolutely. Language development gives us some of the clearest and often quite amusing examples of U-shapes that many parents will instantly recognize.
Right.
Before kids consistently nail the past tense of irregular verbs went, 8 saw almost all of them go through that phase of overregularization.
The Ed everywhere phase.
Exactly. As linguists like Irvin, Miller, Bybee, Slobin suggested, the very early stage is often rote learning. A toddler says, "I went," because they heard it, memorized it as a chunk.
Got it.
Then comes that crucial period of, linguistic disorganization as they start to grasp the powerful rule, add. And that's when the overregularization kicks in before they fully integrate the rules and the exceptions.
So just to recap, they might say, "I went" correctly at first, just copying. Then learning the Ed rule makes them say, "I goed" for a while. That's the bottom of the U, a sign their brain is working on the patterns.
Exactly. That goad-eated-run phase is the bottom of the U. And paradoxically, it's profound evidence of cognitive and linguistic progress. They're actively analyzing, hypothesizing about language.
Not just parroting.
Right. Then, with more exposure, more practice, building that mental dictionary of irregulars alongside the rule for regulars, their system gets more sophisticated. They learn the exceptions, integrate everything.
And they go back to saying, "I went" correctly.
And they go back to, "I went, I ate," consistently. It's a very common, well-documented pattern showing that dynamic interplay between different learning systems.
Okay, so it's clear this isn't just a few weird, isolated examples then. This U-shaped pattern seems much broader.
Oh, definitely not isolated. The empirical evidence is really widespread across many different domains. You see it in perception.
Like what?
Like how infants initially discriminate a huge range of phonetic sounds, even ones not in their native language. Then they narrow down, focusing only on their native language sounds. That's a dip in discriminating foreign sounds.
Oh, okay.
But then later, maybe through learning a second language or specific training, they can regain some broader discrimination ability, but at a more advanced conscious level.
Interesting. What else?
We see it in fine motor coordination. Think about a young child reaching for something. Initially, it might be a fairly smooth, ballistic movement. Then, as they gain more conscious control over individual joints and muscles, the movement can become more segmented, less fluid, a temporary dip in smoothness.
As they're figuring out the details.
Exactly. Before it becomes smooth, coordinated, and highly adaptable again at a higher level, we see versions of this in eye-hand coordination, other motor skills, even, fascinatingly, in creativity.
Creativity, how does that work?
Well, think about the spontaneous, uninhibited creativity often seen in very young children. Then, as they learn formal rules, artistic conventions, the right way to draw or play music,
They might become less free.
exactly. That initial spark might seem to dim a U-shaped dip as they internalize the rules. But then, true mastery often involves re-emerging with a more sophisticated creativity that can use the rules, bend them, break them intentionally, leading to truly original work.
So learning the rules causes a dip before enabling higher creativity.
Potentially, yes. The bottom line is the existence of U-shaped functions is undeniable. They pop up everywhere. The key is always interpreting them within the specific context, considering the domain-specific factors driving that particular developmental path.
Okay, so if this is happening across so many areas, what does this actually mean for how we measure development, particularly in kids, or how we decide if someone needs help and intervention?
That's the million-dollar question, really.
Because if development isn't always a straight line, if it has these hidden U-turns, our current tools, our tests, our diagnostic methods might be missing something really important.
They absolutely could be.
We could be seeing these normal developmental dips and thinking they're actual problems or deficits when they're not.
This raises profoundly important questions with huge practical implications. What does this mean for test development, for diagnostic practice? Our source really highlights significant challenges for test development and construction itself.
How so?
Well, often, diagnostic tests are built on a fundamental assumption that all the items measure the same underlying ability, just at different difficulty levels, a single continuum.
Right, harder questions measure more of the same skill.
That's the idea. But as researchers like Oppenheim pointed out ages ago, some abilities don't develop in isolation. They depend on other changing variables, internal things like cognitive strategies, external things like feedback. This makes simple unidimensional tests potentially insufficient to capture the real complexity, especially of U-shaped development.
So a test designed to measure, say, aiming skill in a 3-year-old might not be accurate for a 6-year-old, even if it's called the same skill, because how they do it has changed.
Precisely. The test's content, the cognitive demands it places on the child, can qualitatively change with age, even if the overt behavior looks similar.
Like that discrimination task example.
Exactly. A simple task for an infant might rely on basic sensory processing. But for an older child, the same task might trigger complex rule-based learning processes. They're using a totally different cognitive toolkit.
And if the test doesn't account for that,
it can easily lead to misconceptions about their true developmental stage. You might misinterpret performance if you don't consider these hidden shifts in strategy or underlying processes. We saw this with sensory perception, motor coordination like the stepping reflex, even typing.
Right.
If your test only captures one point in time, and that happens to be the bottom of a U-shape, you might wrongly conclude there's a chronic deficit when it's just a temporary developmental dip.
That's worrying.
It is. And add to that how tests are often constructed using classical test theory.
The traditional way.
Yeah. It usually expects item difficulty to increase smoothly with age. Items get harder as kids get older, reflecting continuous improvement.
Okay.
But if you only build or validate your test using specific age groups, say, you test kids at age 2, age 5, and age 8, but not at 3 or 4 or 6 or 7.
You could completely miss the dip in between.
Exactly. The U-shape might simply be invisible because you lack the data points for those crucial intermediate ages. And what's even more concerning sometimes, if results don't show that smooth upward trend, if they look non-monotonic, they get dismissed too easily. Researchers or test developers might call it methodological deficiency, or just noise.
Instead of seeing it as a real developmental pattern.
Right, rather than recognizing it as potentially a true, complex developmental phenomenon. This makes me suspect that U-shaped courses might be far more common than the literature currently suggests. Our methods might just not be good at finding them.
Okay, this sounds like it could have really serious practical consequences for developmental diagnostics. You know, for the clinicians, the educators, the parents, trying to figure out if a child needs support.
Absolutely. Misleading test results could cause so much unnecessary worry.
Or lead to the wrong kind of help, or maybe even missing a child who does need help because their score looks okay at one point in time, but it's actually the start of a problematic deviation, not a healthy U-turn.
It's a massive challenge for diagnosticians. The implications for kids and families are huge. If you estimate performance levels just based on a test score, without understanding U-shapes and the child's specific age context, it's almost impossible to know where they truly are on their developmental path without ambiguity.
The score alone is incomplete.
Potentially very misleading, yes.
Can you give us another really concrete example how this ambiguity looks in practice?
Yeah, the source gives a great one, using the development of aiming accuracy based on research by Hay and colleagues.
Okay, aiming, like throwing a ball at a target.
Something like that. Imagine a graph. Aiming accuracy on the vertical axis, age on the horizontal. Now, picture a line representing a specific performance level, say, hitting the target with a certain precision.
Got it.
On this particular developmental function, that same level of performance was achieved by kids aged 4.5 years, 5.5 years, and 8.5 years.
The exact same score at 3 different ages.
Exactly the same score. So if you only look at that number, you have no idea. Is the 5.5-year-old at the bottom of a U-shaped dip maybe struggling to integrate new motor strategies? Right. Or is the 8.5-year-old with the same score actually at a more advanced stage than the 4.5-year-old?
Yeah.
Maybe they've already passed through the dip and are now functioning at a higher, more integrated level, even though the raw score happens to match the younger child.
You just can't tell from the score alone.
You can't. The meaning is totally different depending on where they are on that curve.
So just using standard scores, like Z-scores or IQ scores, to quantify this kind of complex process, it might be insufficient or even meaningless.
It can be insufficient or, yeah, sometimes even nonsensical in these contexts. The core recommendation that emerges is move beyond a single global score.
What should we do instead?
Diagnosticians really need to try and break down the overall performance into its underlying parts, its subcomponents, and assess those separately.
Okay, so for aiming.
For aiming, maybe you separately assess perception, how well they see the target, cognition, how they plan the movement, and motor execution, how smoothly they perform the action.
Get more granular.
Exactly. This kind of multifaceted, granular approach dramatically increases the sensitivity and the explanatory power of the assessment. It gives you a much more nuanced, accurate picture of the child's real profile, not just a potentially misleading number.
So it's not just what score you get, but how you got it, and critically, when you got it at what age. The whole developmental context matters immensely.
That's the key takeaway. Context is everything. And we also need to remember, as Siegler pointed out, how often you measure makes a difference.
Right. Annual tests might miss the U-shape.
While weekly measures might reveal it clearly, and of course you often need different diagnostic tools for different ages. What works for an infant won't work for a school-aged child.
So we always have to ask, is this pattern real development or just an artifact of how we're measuring?
Constant vigilance is required. It's essential for accurate assessment and intervention.
Okay, this is critical. Let's shift to therapeutic treatment programs. Could understanding these U-shapes actually change how therapists work, especially with kids learning new coping skills or behavior?
Well, absolutely. The implications for therapy are direct and profound.
How so?
Well, think about it. If U-shapes can happen naturally when the brain integrates new strategies, when it reorganizes itself, then similar patterns should theoretically show up during the reorganizational processes spurred by therapy itself.
Okay, makes sense.
Imagine a child in therapy learning a new, healthier way to manage anxiety, moving away from an old, less effective coping mechanism.
Right.
Initially, even with great therapy, they might seem to get worse for a bit. They might struggle, appear to regress. Why? Cognitive overload.
Because they're dismantling the old way and the new way isn't automatic yet?
Exactly. They're in that messy, inefficient transition phase. The old strategy is being disrupted. The new one isn't fully wired in.
So, and this feels huge, the child might actually get worse before they get better, even with effective treatment. And that dip, that regression, could actually be a sign the therapy is working.
Precisely. It could be a necessary part of the restructuring process, not a sign of failure.
That's a massive reframing for therapists, parents, even the person in therapy.
It truly is. This temporary regression could be a direct result of the treatment working as intended, a necessary step before the child's ability improves again, maybe even beyond their previous level.
But if therapists or parents don't know about this U-shaped potential,
they could easily misinterpret that dip. They might think, this isn't working, or they're getting worse.
And they might stop the therapy too soon.
That's the worst-case scenario. Prematurely stopping a highly effective treatment because you misread a temporary, necessary dip as failure.
Wow.
So it's absolutely crucial for future clinicians, for anyone involved in therapy or intervention, to factor in these U-shaped dynamics when designing programs, evaluating progress, and analyzing individual development.
It fosters patience, perseverance.
And a much more nuanced, accurate understanding of what therapeutic progress actually looks like. It's not always a straight line up.
This has been such a fascinating deep dive. It touches on something so fundamental, so human, but often kind of invisible. We've talked about learning, diagnosis, therapy. What does the future hold? Where do we go from here in understanding and using these U-shaped insights?
Well, the source really emphasizes that while we've identified quite a few U-shaped functions across different areas,
Right, the examples we discussed,
the findings are still a bit fragmentary. It's like we have many pieces of this really interesting mosaic, but they aren't all perfectly connected yet.
we don't have the full picture.
Not quite. So future research is absolutely essential. Ideally, research based on real scientific cooperation across disciplines, cognitive science, neuroscience, education, clinical psychology working together.
Breaking down the silos.
Exactly. That's indispensable for getting truly new, comprehensive insights into the real nature, the underlying mechanisms of U-shaped development. We need to connect those dots more effectively.
Okay, methodologically, are there new tools helping with this?
Yes, definitely. Methodological innovations, especially in things like neurocomputational approaches, are really boosting our ability to describe these complex functions more accurately, even predictively.
Neurocomputational.
Yeah.
Like computer models of brain processes.
Sort of, yeah. For instance, Morse and colleagues presented a really promising model. It's based on refining ideas about associative learning within a framework called the Epigenetic Robotics Architecture, or ERA.
Okay, ERA, Epigenetic Robotics Architecture. Can you give us the quick version? Is this like using AI or complex simulations to model how these U-turns happen?
That's a great way to put it, yeah. ERA is essentially a computational framework. You could think of it as a type of AI model designed to simulate how learning and development unfold, often in artificial agents like robots. by mimicking biological learning processes.
So you can test theories virtually.
Exactly. It lets researchers create these virtual environments to test different theories about how knowledge is acquired, how it gets restructured over time. These models are incredibly valuable because they let us estimate key developmental characteristics by simulating these complex interactions.
How does that work?
They usually assume that the basic pattern of change within an individual follows the same general function across different people, even if the timing or extent varies a bit. This allows researchers to use growth models to get detailed info about both the within-person changes and the between-person differences in those changes.
So it's moving beyond just observing to trying to understand the mechanics and maybe even predict these patterns.
Precisely. It's a powerful tool for digging into the how and why, not just the what.
Okay. And what about diagnostics? What's the future look like there?
Well, looking ahead, future diagnostic procedures really need to get better optimized, not just to measure the overall performance level.
Like that aiming score example.
Right, but to actually identify and analyze those interacting subcomponents that contribute to the development of an ability.
Breaking it down again.
Yes. Remember, for any skill, there are often multiple perceptual, cognitive, motor parts working together, and they might develop at different speeds.
The asynchronous development idea.
Exactly. So a more systematic, detailed analysis of how these subcomponents interact, how they influence each other, maybe temporarily conflict, that would give us incredibly helpful information.
How would that help clinically?
It could reveal clinically significant indicators for developmental change much earlier or with much more precision. It would allow us to intervene more effectively, target support better, and crucially, have a much clearer sense of when a temporary dip is just a healthy U-turn versus a real developmental issue needing specific attention.
So moving from just measuring performance to truly understanding the dynamic dance of development underneath.
That's the goal. A much deeper, more dynamic understanding. Hashtag tag outro.
Wow. What a journey through this surprising, sometimes confusing, but ultimately fascinating world of U-shaped development.
It really is fascinating, isn't it?
From babies learning to step, to expert typists defying age, to kids wrestling with grammar, it's just crystal clear that progress isn't always a straight line up.
Not at all. It's far more intricate, more dynamic, and frankly just more interesting than a simple upward curve.
It definitely encourages us, I think, to think more critically about what progress even means. To look beyond just the simple numbers or scores.
Absolutely. This deep dive really shows us that sometimes getting worse at something, experiencing that temporary dip, isn't failure. It isn't a permanent step back.
It can actually be a vital step forward.
It can be a vital, even necessary step towards a higher, more integrated, more sophisticated level of skill or understanding. It just highlights the incredible complexity, the adaptability, the resilience of the human mind and body.
So here's a final thought, something provocative for you, our listener, to maybe mull over after this conversation. How might recognizing these U-turns, maybe in our own lives, maybe in our kids, our students, our colleagues, whether it's learning a new skill, trying to adopt a new habit, mastering something complex, or even just working through a personal challenge, how might recognizing these U-turns change how we perceive failure or regression?
That's a powerful question.
Could understanding the U make us more patient with ourselves and with others, more persistent when things feel temporarily difficult, and ultimately maybe more appreciative of those often hidden, winding, sometimes backtracking, but profoundly human pathways to true mastery?